The way you touch my waist, baby, I swear I can't resist. 'Cause the way you do, nobody else do the way you do. 'Cause the way you do, nobody else do the way you do. 'Cause the way you do, nobody else do. Just the way you do. 'Cause the way you do, nobody else do. Just like you do.
Tshepiso Makwetla winds it down on Africa World Hour, 9 to 10 p.m.
And it is 2100 hours on this Wednesday afternoon, or evening rather. Evening, it's nighttime. In fact, a very good evening to you. This is Africa World Hour. I am Tshepiso Makwetla, and this is Channel Africa, the African Perspective, as we bring you the very latest news in and around your world, wherever you are listening, watching from the heart of Africa to all corners of the globe. We bring you the voices, the stories, and the perspectives that matter. And you, of course, are the people that matter. So reach out to us on +2763 406 9126. We'd like to hear your perspective on some of the stories that we're covering. So let's take you through to our headlines this evening.
1 hour, one continent, one voice. Africa World Hour with Tshepiso Makwetla on Channel Africa, the African Perspective.
And it is exactly that. Countless stories, one planet. Let's take you through it. We start in the United States, where Special Envoy Steve Witkoff says President Donald Trump will chair a large meeting on post-war Gaza in Washington later on today. This as Israel pushes ahead with the plan to conquer the territory. Trump's earlier plan was to take over Gaza and relocate its citizens. Asked if Israel should act differently to end the war and secure the return of hostages, Witkoff says the matter will be settled one way or the other.
Unilateral tactical pauses alone do not allow for the continuous flow of supplies required to meet immense needs in Gaza. We have our own proven distribution networks that have been effective in the past, and are encouraging all states to support the effort to go back to having unobstructed delivery of humanitarian aid.
Germany's cabinet has put forward draft legislation aimed at introducing voluntary military service. The bill could also pave a way for conscription. This comes as major European powers rearm following Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine. The BBC's Bethany Bell has more.
The German government said it was aiming to strengthen the army's reserves and active forces. In future, all 18-year-old Germans, both men and women, will be sent an online questionnaire asking if they're willing to volunteer for military service. The government says this will be voluntary for as long as possible. However, if the security situation gets worse or if there are too few volunteers, the government could decide to make military service compulsory with the approval of Parliament.
And South Africa's International Relations and Cooperations Minister Ronald Lamola says Pretoria will continue to advocate for peace and at a global stage. He says the conflicts on the continent are of concern and hinder economic development amid the US imposition of tariffs on numerous countries, including a 30% tariff hike on South Africa. Lamola was briefing the media in Pretoria. He says the country has established a team to assess conflicts on the region.
A delegation led by the Deputy Director General for Africa, Ambassador Tebogosi Okolo, recently visited Burkina Faso, Mali and Niger to gain first-hand insights into the dynamics in the Sahel region. In the Great Lakes region, South Africa remains gravely concerned about the humanitarian and the security situation in the Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo, despite peace agreement.
And we move now to Botswana, where the government says it intends to raise 2.5 billion pula or 3.2 billion rands by the end of next month. It says it will spend it on addressing the country's public health challenges. President Duma Boko has declared a state of public health emergency. This as health facilities experience a shortage of essential medicine, including ARVs. The Botswana Development Corporation is tasked with securing $370 million. The corporation's managing director is Oteng Gyabetsu.
This has compromised our fight against HIV/AIDS. It has compromised our fight against NCDs, as this has been demonstrated by lack of access to proper services. The government has been sitting on this problem since the beginning of this year. We are not talking about like a natural disaster or a pandemic like COVID. We are talking about man-made problems emanating from lack of structure, lack of coordination, and lack of control. Our position is the government would want to suspend laws to do what they want to do. This should have gone through Parliament, like previously when this was done. It had to go through Parliament.
And finally, a report has accused security forces in Mauritania of serious human rights violations against migrants. It says rights violations are exacerbated by the European Union and Spain continuing to outsource migration management to Mauritania. The BBC's Guy Hedgeker reports.
Human Rights Watch alleges that between 2020 and early 2025, Mauritania had pursued what it called an abusive migration control playbook, with security forces, military and border control personnel raping, torturing and extorting migrants, as well as using inhumane detention conditions. Mauritania has become an increasingly common departure point for African migrants trying to reach Europe via Spain's Canary Islands by boat.
And that's where we leave it for now. We are still to bring you several news on developments on the Democratic Republic of Congo. This is peace talks continue in Qatar, and we'll also tell you about preparations for elections in Tanzania.
Nighttime radio, just the way you like it, on Channel Africa, where the night comes alive.
Okay, let's start with our top story, and that is the government of the Democratic Republic of Congo and the M23 rebels have reconvened for peace talks in Doha, the capital city of Qatar. The latest round of talks follows reports of renewed violence in the DRC's conflict-torn east. The violence is seen as a regression after the two parties inked a ceasefire agreement in July aimed at leading to a permanent end to the fighting that has devastated the DRC's mineral-rich east. Under the terms of the deal, the parties were to begin peace talks on the 8th of August and finalize an agreement by August 18. But both deadlines have expired with no agreement in sight. For a look at what's transpired so far, we're joined now by Channel Africa's editor for Kiswahili Service, Nixon Katembo, who himself is from the DRC. Nixon, a very good evening to you. So let's just track back to the peace talks. We spoke on the onset, or rather as they were unfolding, looking at the prospects for long-term peace, and we are where we are now. Any surprises for you, and what have your thoughts been as you've seen this happen?
I think it is not surprising the way that those talks are dragging on, and assess that in my own analysis and view that there is a lack of political will to end this conflict, in as much as people might think that perhaps that's the way the both parties the Congolese government.
Yes, you're saying the Congolese government, Nixon?
The Congolese government, first and foremost, took the case to the United Nations Security Council, which issued a resolution in earlier this year, condemning the M23 and calling for the Rwandan withdrawal of troops over from Eastern Congo. And instead of following that with the effort that were being made by Angola and the Nairobi processes, which falls in part with the question of the negotiations with all armed conflict, including the M23. Instead, Congo chose to externalize the negotiations and went to Qatar together with the M23 and under the auspices of the Qatar government, which in part have trade agreements with the Rwandan government for that matter, and yet the Rwandan government is supporting the M23 as we know it. So that is one aspect. The second aspect is on the part of the Congolese government itself, with the opposition facing pressure from the opposition to going towards the elections, and therefore for President Tshisekedi having come out last year with a proposal of changing the constitutions to constitutional mandates from 5 years to 7 years, but also extending the period of the government, in other words, the president, to remain in the power until 2030, or even removing the term limit for that matter. So that the nexus between power shift within the Congolese government, the interest of the president himself vis-a-vis the interest of the Rwandan government and those of the M23 are getting in a way of finding a solution to the Congolese crisis at the moment. And those who do not understand the dynamics, they think that maybe there are negotiations going on. But I think in my own analysis, and this will be proven over time, that there is no political will to end the conflict for now based on various interests. However, you should not, and maybe the listener should not, that the M23 have an upper hand in terms of military support and the military leverage, having push the government into critical areas such as Bukavu and Goma, where they now control a substantial amount of resources in terms of the production of coltan. And you know that coltan's wild coltan in in Congo account for about 70% of production of coltan in the entire world. So the M23 control that in terms of economic terms. So that is a leverage. At a military level, of course, they have expanded in more territories, whereas the Congolese government and forces are showing some weaknesses or allying with the FDLR or even the militia Wazalendo that they are called, although the chain of command within the Congolese armed forces have demonstrated some weaknesses.
Okay, Nixon, let me jump in there because I actually wanted to bring you to the whole aspect of the involvement of the FDLR and M23 vis-a-vis, as we have spoken about, although Rwanda has denied, it's being aligned to that. And that is happening. The mass murderings are continuing in the East as a result of these two parties and others, of course. And by two parties, I'm talking about M23 Rwanda, I'm talking about FDLR, the Congolese military. But at the same time, the developments are that there are calls from the Attorney General in the DRC for former President Joseph Kabila to face the death penalty as a result of crimes against humanity, genocide, etc., etc. That particular dynamic, how will it affect what is happening on the ground and the various allegiances as they carry out retributive killings against those that they see as the enemy?
Look, Tsepiso, I'm on a record saying that trying the former president was a miscalculation on a part of the current president. You would know that there was a deal between Kabila and Tshisekedi, although that deal went sour, and both men have been contesting for power since Tshisekedi came into at the helm of the state in the Congo. Mind you, by Tshisekedi, by Kabila's own agreements that they say both signed. So that is one aspect. The second aspect is that you, in a negotiation in the diplomatic terms, you cannot always view your enemies as a mortal enemy, and therefore there is no room for negotiations. In other words, the legal aspect in which Kabila is tried does not necessarily help the Congolese government to be able to master the negotiation and the diplomatic side to make sure that Kabila is part and parcel of the problem and part and parcel of the solution in the diplomatic sense by negotiating him and allowing him access to his own resources, such as whatever he has accumulated during his term in office and power in Kinshasa. So, and therefore, by cornering him, in that sense, it allows him to align with the M23, and therefore you saw him going to Goma because that was the only option that left available to him. And that poses a problem in finding a peaceful solution, because by antagonizing potential partners in finding a diplomatic solution to the conflict, you aggravate the situation because you're not willing to compromise on a certain key aspect, and therefore bringing the problem to its conclusions in a diplomatic sense.
So if we were to talk about, okay, continue, Nixon.
However, if you look at now the current composition, President Tshisekedi seems to have taken a more personal view of not opening up a diplomatic space and thinking that maybe the negotiated peace deal for minerals with the United States and Rwanda is going to open up a way of him crushing the internal opposition, which cannot happen because the internal opposition have to be part and parcel of the solution. And therefore you see the initiative for a much needed inter-Congolese dialogue where Congolese in the opposition, in the armed opposition and the civil opposition, including civil society, the church, the Catholic Church, which is more vocal in the Congo, they need to come together to a sort of a second Sun City aspect of a dialogue, all discussing the future of the Congo.
The beauty of it, Nixon, and maybe it's because we're colleagues, we understand each other's thinking. So you're taking it to the Sun City dialogue, and which is exactly where I was going to take it to. You spoke about various and competing interests, and particularly in terms of trade deals, we speak about the United States, we speak about the Qataris, and we speak about Rwanda. The cutting off at the knees of the role of regional bodies in bringing about peace to the DRC. What will be the impact of that? Relying on Arab nations, relying on the United States, whereas there should be a better interstate play in terms of bringing about peace, not involving your IGAD again, not involving SADC. How is that going to impact on a long-term sustainable peace will want to be achieved?
Sustainable peace won't be achieved without the involvement of the regional players. Congo is part of the SADC region. Congo is part of the East African region. Congo is a part of the community of Central African states. And therefore, any solution that seeks to deal with the issue of the Congo have to involve all these players in mind. And therefore, the problem with the President Tshisekedi's models of operandi in terms of the negotiations by externalizing this conflict without necessarily taking account to all regional dynamics will remain a problem, and I believe that will not solve the issue of the Congo. That's one aspect. Look at how, on the part of the Congo, they haven't even ratified the deal that was signed in Washington, whereas on the other side in Rwanda, the Rwandan government has put through the document in parliament and ratified it as a foregone conclusions. And therefore, who looks bad? The Congolese themselves, the Congolese government itself look bad for not living up to the Washington agreement principles or agreement of principles. And therefore, you need a sober mind within the Congolese government to understand that this cannot go on. However, what I see, I think, and I might be wrong here, that President Tshisekedi look at his personal interest instead of looking at the long-term prospect of stabilizing the country, and therefore, for him, negotiations become more personal than being about the Congolese state and its future.
Right.
That's one aspect, number one. The second aspect is for him to see how this protracted negotiations goes on, so that by the time his mandate ends in 2028, he's able to say, okay, now you can organize a Congolese dialogue where we talk and extend his term of office until 2030. Those has been the talks within the Congolese government circle to make sure that they extend this mandate. And in French, they have a term, they call it glissement. You remember that the president was with Kabila, whose term was supposed to end in 2016, but he did that glissement until the elections happened at the end of 2020.
Right. Nixon, we're going to have to end it here, I'm afraid, because we have run out of time, and I know we are also testing your cellular connection. Thank you very much for coming on to join us, colleague. I know you're being on the road. Nixon Katemba is the Kiswahili service editor here at Channel Africa, but of course Nixon himself being Congolese national who very much understands what has been happening. He's lived it and seen even more grave things that he's spoken about. Right, brings the time to 22 minutes past 9. In just a moment we'll look at the election landscape ahead of Tanzania's elections.
Hi there. Do you want to elevate your business and give it a voice in South Africa and Africa as a whole? Well, in that case, let Channel Africa make this a possibility. Channel Africa is willing to advertise your business for as little as 30,000 rands or $1,719.18. To get access to these great rates, send all requests to mokoenata@SABC. That's MOKOENATA@SABC. Channel Africa, the African perspective. The Upside, your afternoons just got even better.
Bantu Biko Street by Simpiwe Dana. Ndi ready. Simpiwe, 20 years in song. So what emotions come up when you hear that, hey, you've been doing this for 20 years now?
It almost feels like no time has passed, eh? I just, I know obviously time has passed, but I don't feel it. Even about my age, I'm 45. I always get shocked when I think, oh my God, in 5 years' time, I'll be 50. Because for me as an artist, it's almost like when it comes to certain things, time stands still. And as a result, you find that a lot of artists are very childlike, which, it helps them to always have a fresh approach to issues.
I tell you what, I'm feeling healed just by that.
We take no sides, none whatsoever. We are the Upside. Africa World Hour. Africa World Hour. Unpacking global headlines from an African perspective.
And we continue with Africa World Hour, 24 minutes past 9. This time we look at Tanzania's Electoral Commission. It barred the presidential candidates of its second biggest opposition from contesting polls in October, leaving only President Samia Suluhu Hassan to face candidates from smaller parties. The Independent National Electoral Commission, or INEC, approved Hassan and her running mate, Emmanuel Chimbi, to run in the October 29 election after receiving their nomination forms today. And we speak now to Executive Director at Tanzania Citizens Information Bureau and Elections Expert Kibamba to speak about what the political landscape is like there in Tanzania, especially as opposition parties call for a boycott of the poll. A very good evening to you, and thank you so much for taking this time to speak to us.
Good evening. Thank you so much for having me.
So this decision that's been made by INEC, it refused 18 other parties we saw the fact that there are 18 other parties who are refusing to take part in the election. They've signed the Zanzibar General Election Code of Ethics, but they believe that a boycott ought to be the stance that the country should be taking. Explain to us how this build-up has occurred. Has there been a silencing of dissent? Has there been a constriction of freedom to speak out against what the government has done or failed to do? Yes,
indeed. The political landscape in my country, Tanzania, right now is actually not very good. If we are speaking of free and fair elections, how you wish, you will have a better landscape. There's been a lot of infight within the ruling party CCM, and let me mention, CCM is more than a party. CCM, is a ruling machinery. It takes advantage of having ruled, Tanzania since before independence. So CCM comes from, CCM is a major of the Tanganyika African National Union, TANU, which was there, which fought for independence, just like UNIP or ANC in South Africa, or say KANU, the Kenya African National Union in Kenya, and therefore it's so much CCM is quite deep rooted, and to say that CCM can be competing with the parties that I saw today, garnering the nomination by the the Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC, in Tanzania. I think this is it's like a joke, because the only party that voters believe in Tanzania would have forged at least some competitive, politics with CCM is Chadema. Now, the main opposition, Chadema, is actually boycotting elections because they believe there needs to be very major reforms, electoral reforms, reforms in terms of the constitutional court, reforms in terms of the regulations that guide Tanzania's elections before they can participate in the process. So now seeing that today, even the other, at least opposition party that you would have said from the look of the matters here would have at least provided some kind of competition. The Alliance for Change and Transparency in Tanzania, ACT, the contestant for that party has actually been blocked, officially blocked, by the Independent National Electoral Commission, which comes from, a block that the registrar of political parties had actually done, submitted to INEC.
Now, I'm just wondering, the bid to sentence to death Chadema's leader, opposition leader, how does that play into the general atmosphere of the electorate? Do they feel that they have a choice to vote for any other than CCM?
No, what I see, I have observed elections in a number of countries since 1993, when I started observing elections. And as I look at matters here, I believe that the 2025 elections here are not going to be very competitive. In fact, I speak to quite a lot of potential voters, even those that have registered for voting, and they tell me they are not going to be going out to vote on Wednesday, the 29th of October, 2025. And the main reason potential voters are giving is that there's no need, there's no value. It's meaningless to be going out to vote when you're almost voting for just one party. So what the voters are saying is that until and unless the main opposition, Chadema, was actually allowed to be able to be in the race, which is not possible by today, it is impossible that Chadema can actually be in the ballots. If Chadema is not there, a lot of the voters or potential voters, let me say, are saying it's meaningless to be going out to vote. And let me tell you, for a number of citizens I spoke to, not just in Dar es Salaam, where I am based, but also in the countryside, a lot of people believe there's no legal case against Tundu Lissu, the opposition leader. They are saying all of this seems to be, fear from within CCM, that if they left Tundu Antipas Lissu, who is advocate of the High Court and also, a human rights activist, and also the leader for the opposition, Chadema, CCM fears that they were going to be receiving a lot of stiff competition in this election.
And I mean, just what happened to Tundu Lissu, the story of the fact that he spent several years on his back getting operations because he had several AK-47 bullet holes in him because of an attempted assassination, itself draws a very visceral picture of the violence against opposition. And I'm not saying opposition, all opposition parties, but opposition in its very conceptual form. Looking at President Hassan, when she came into power, taking over John Magufuli, there was a sense that she would be the milder of the two, that she would allow for democracy to grow, and that there would be a freer movement in the expression of dissenting opinions. What has happened? How would you, as an observer of elections, but also as a political analyst who's seen these things unfold, Tanzania come to this point where their hope has turned into despair?
I think, when President Samia Suluhu Hassan started her tenure, constitutionally having taken over from, the loss of our former president, Dr. John Pombe Magufuli, she had a lot of promises. In fact, she actually looked like was considered to be some kind of an angel president. Why? Because a lot of Tanzanians thought this was time for a lady president. People have loved here that Tanzania would have a lady president, but also based on her own promises. She was saying, we cannot continue living like this. Tanzania, we can't be living in a situation where dissent is actually attacked, by way of a gun, a barrel of a gun. So I remember her even starting, her own slogan, which she branded 4R, rebuilding, reforms, reconstruction, and reconciliation. So, in her own words, she was saying this country, seems to have been led in a manner which is not democratic. And minding, she was the vice president before she officially became president, but she was quite unsatisfied with how her predecessor, had run this country. And so a lot of people, Samia Suluhu Hassan, appealed. She was quite appealing to the common citizenry in Tanzania. But come, last year, 2024, things started changing. And she almost forgot the 4 R's, reforms, reconstruction, rebuilding, reconciliation. And then we started seeing drama, that went to attacking, the main opposition, especially Chadema. And also, there was a call for reforms, major reforms to the, electoral laws, electoral code. And we didn't see that. We only saw cosmetic, changes being tabled to Parliament of Tanzania, which actually is dominated by the ruling party, CCM. So what we've seen now today is that officially CCM is not interested in wanting to see competitive elections, that the party herself, CCM, can actually stand against stronger parties to be able to compete meaningfully. Yeah, so this is what we are seeing. And based on this, I can only conclude by saying, I think we are going to see a lot of apathy in this year's election. A lot of people are not going to turn up to the voting on October 29 because people have despaired. There's a lot of despair as I see now.
Deuce, we're going to leave it there, but I really do thank you for your time. Deuce Kibamba is Executive Director at Tanzania's Citizens Information Bureau and elections expert. Just speaking to us about what is happening in Tanzania in the lead up to those October polls. So it brings the time to 24 minutes to 10.
Mornings made better with Peter and Asanda on Rise and Shine, weekdays 6 till 9.
Former politician and diplomat. He's the leader of the Democratic Alliance Party at one stage, and also served as South Africa's ambassador to Argentina, Uruguay and Paraguay. Ambassador Tony Leon, if you were party leader now and in the GNU, what would you be pushing for?
I can speak with some direct experience because, as you might know, I was actually one of the negotiators of the GNU last year when it was formed. What I'd be pushing for is to hold the government's or the president's feet to the fire on actually operationalizing the agreement that was implemented. Unfortunately, that agreement has been honored only in its breach. And I think, go back to basics and just say, okay, we're not going any further with this arrangement until we actually implement these steps.
Mornings made better with Peter and Asanda on Rise and Shine. 1 hour, 1 continent, 1 voice. Africa World Hour with Tsepiso Makwetla on Channel Africa, the African perspective.
And as we give you a roundup of some of the top stories developing and, of course, unfolding today, we been talking about the lead up to elections and the atmosphere of whether or not free and fair election is possible in Tanzania. Now we come back to the Independent Electoral Commission of South Africa. Gender and governance expert Dr. Ditare Rabella says due to safety concerns, more women will fear to participate as candidates in the forthcoming municipal elections. She was speaking at the IEC event themed Women Championing Democracy, paving the way to the 2026 local government elections. The one-day gathering at Constitutional Hill, Johannesburg, was attended by women in influential positions, including politicians, media practitioners, gender activists, academics, amongst others. Dr. Rabella says most women fear for their safety in a male-dominated and violent political space at the local sphere of government. She was speaking to SABC political correspondent Ntebo Mokobo.
Gender-based political violence may be a term unfamiliar to many, but in fact it is the intimidation and targeting of women in politics, used mainly to discourage them from participating in politics. This came under the spotlight at the IEC event on women representation in the political space. Although 55% of the 27.6 million registered voters are women, the representation of women in parliament sits at 43%, while 21% of them are represented in the National Council of Provinces. With the local elections seen as another layer of government where women should be featured, gender and governance expert Dr. Ditare Rabella says in fact this has become the most dangerous space for women, often steeped in political killings.
I have done a lot of research on women, peace and security and how lack of security affect women's participation in elections. A recent example of the attack on former KZN Premier, attack on her house. What does that say to other women aspiring to be in politics? Unfortunately, the local government elections, it's a cash cow for politicians. All the issues around tenders, this leads to the political killings that we are seeing. The fear of being intimidated and attacked and your family being harassed forces women to decline even where they could be given opportunities.
With fears that women will be reluctant to participate in the forthcoming elections due to their concerns, the IEC Deputy Chairperson Janet Love says South African women should see the failure of governance as an opportunity for them to actively participate in elections, insisting that with service delivery being a problem at the local sphere of government, women should see that as an opportunity for them to save the situation.
As a result of our representatives not performing in the way in which people had hoped and so on, instead of women cherishing their own capacities to do more, to be more, to participate more, there's a kind of feeling, what is the point? And I think really what we're saying is it's the women who will make this country the kind of place we need. And if not everything that they've wanted has turned out the way they've wanted, the answer is not to stand back. The answer is to push forward with even greater resistance.
Women who also participate in politics had their take. Former ANC Women's League President Bathabile Dlamini says women must stop working against each other and start to act as a collective.
We were able to participate in the negotiations because of working together as political parties and other women's formations. We worked together, but after the elections, we went back to our parties and we forgot about issues of gender equality and equity.
The IFP's Tumira Makwaba says women have made it easier for men to trample on their rights.
As women in the political spaces, are we not the enablers of the system? Are we not the actual culprits that enable men to be so comfortable in stepping on each other to get to the top?
With voter apathy prevalent amongst young people, some young women believe that women and young people in particular should be at the center of the country's political governance, as the chairperson of the National Youth Development Agency, Dr. Sunshine Miende, explains.
You can't want to influence something that you never participated in. It's like walking into a room and saying, this room should have looked like this. But when you are given the opportunity to define how the room should look like, you decided to stand outside the gate. So on that regard, I'm saying, as the NYDA, we're going to crisscross the country to go and encourage young people to go and register the vote.
And emerging from this IEC Women Post-Barrage, their country's women, both young and old, say like the 1956 generation that bravely marched against the unjust laws, they too need to unite and chart a new path of prosperity for women. I am Tebo Mokobe in Johannesburg.
When the sun goes down, we don't stop the talk. Channel Africa, the best nighttime radio.
And indeed, it is the best time to listen to what has been happening in and around your world, from the continent and beyond. As we say, one planet, countless stories. We bring you the voices, the faces, the stories and the perspectives that matter. Channel Africa, the Africa perspective. So right now we talk about the United Nations Human Rights Office. It's condemned the killing of Palestinian journalists in Israeli strikes on Gaza, warning that the world must demand accountability for the mounting toll. The latest deaths bring the number of journalists killed since the war began to at least 247. It's at least, the numbers are not necessarily the full picture. The 5 victims, in this case, Ahmed Abu Aziz, Hassam al-Masri, Mariam Daga, Mohammed Salama, and Moaz Abu Taha, worked for outlets including Middle East Eye, Associated Press, Al Jazeera and Reuters. They were amongst at least 20 people who died when Israeli forces struck Gaza's Nasser hospital in Khan Yunis on Monday. For more, we're joined by senior reporter at Al Jazeera Arabic channel in Gaza, Tamir Al-Nishal. A very good evening to you, and condolences to you as the family of Al Jazeera, but I'd say as the media fraternity, because we've seen many fallen comrades simply because they're trying to bring the truth to the world.
Thank you very much. Of course, what we are witnessing in Gaza is an ongoing genocide and ongoing crimes against Palestinian civilians, including the Palestinian journalists. As you mentioned, we counted during this 22 months of this ongoing war and ongoing genocide, more than 240 Palestinians. Now we are talking about 247 Palestinian journalists have been killed during this genocide, in a number which is the highest number in any conflict or war zone in the current history, in comparison with all war zones. So we are witnessing a genocide against the Palestinian reporters, against the Palestinian journalists. And we understand the reason behind this. It's clearly the Israeli occupation forces. They want to hide the truth. They want to hide the genocide from not being covered by these great and brave journalists. They want these crimes not to be covered. And they are targeting in a systematic way the Palestinian journalists to target the truth, and also not allow for any international journalists to get into Gaza to cover. So they are targeting the few eyes who are covering from there and the few loud voices who are covering from Gaza in a systematic way. And today we are saying it clearly. How many Palestinian journalists do need the world and the international organizations who are calling for the protection of journalists in all the world? How many Palestinian journalists they need to be killed in order to intervene seriously Yes, to do something and intervene seriously to stop this massacre and genocide
Tamer,
against the Palestinian civilians.
I want to just give people a sense because, you know, as you say, these colleagues are dying because they're trying to give the truth to the world. The Israelis, you've seen Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu call the incident a tragic mishap, meaning it was unintended. But I want you to give our listeners or viewers a sense of what it's really like to report in a conflict zone. I don't think anybody who's reported, who's been on the ground in dangerous situations, actually realizes there is no time to make up stories.
Yes, of course, there are many challenges. We are talking about a place for almost 2 years. It's closed, under tough siege. The Israeli occupation forces don't allow for any international journalist to get into Gaza and left a few Palestinian journalists in this area. These brave journalists are working a great and unique coverage, and they are determined to continue their work in order to let the world to understand what's happening. And because of this determination, they are targeted in a systematic way by the Israeli occupation forces. And we are witnessing this increased number of Palestinian journalists. We are talking not just about Palestinian journalists who have been killed, also their families. Those journalists who are covering inside Gaza, they are native Palestinians. They are not outsiders. They have their families. Their homes have been demolished, and we have many of our colleagues. They lost their families. I will mention you a name. Mu'min Lishrafi is our correspondent in Gaza City. He lost 22 of his family, including mother and father. And despite that, he continues to work because he's determined to his professionalism, to his humanity. And so we are saying it clearly. It's the time, even it's late, to say justice for Palestinian journalists, justice for these Palestinian civilians, and stop this massacre, and allow for all international journalists to get into Gaza. You are a journalist, you have the right to go to that place and doing these interviews on the ground. They have the right to support the Palestinian journalists. It's shame on the international world to leave these journalists to be targeted in this way, and additional crimes, justifying the crimes. Now what we are witnessing, crimes against journalists, and also justifying these crimes with baseless or by baseless allegations or fabricated accusations, with no any kind of real intervention from this international world to stop such massacres and such crimes against journalists.
Tamer, your colleague Iman Hillis, who is a fact checker, wrote a very moving article about her friend and relative journalist Amna Hamid and her killing, about what actually happened, that there was misinformation that had been spread about her by Israeli media, ensuring that she was targeted. Can you share similar stories of people who have worked on what is really happening in the Middle East, the killing of, we're talking infants, of children under the age of 5, the elderly, women, and the manner in which they killed? What happens to people like that who paint a real picture of what is going on?
Targeting Palestinian journalists doesn't start just in this war. I will mention you, before this war, we witnessed in West Bank, not in Gaza Strip, the killing of our colleague Shireen Abu Aqla, the Al Jazeera correspondent in West Bank. She has been killed by an Israeli sniper in West Bank. And they killing her, and they changing the narrative 4 times. First, they said we don't have any link to this killing, and they blamed the Palestinian by killing her. And in the end, after a huge pressure, they admitted that an Israeli sniper killed her. During this war, we witnessed a systematic target to the Palestinian journalists, the Palestinian civilians, because they are the only eyes. They are covering what's happening in Gaza. Without their brave work, you won't know what is happening there. Anas al-Sharif, our correspondent, since day one in this war, he has received many threats. I will give you an example. In December 2023, after just a few weeks of his work, he has received a call and calls from Israeli intelligence officers threatening him from continuing his work. And they said to him, we know where are you now. You have to stop your work and leave the work and stop covering. Because he refused and continue his work and his brave work, they targeted his house, killing his father. So this is the way, the challenges of the Palestinian journalists in their work and their brave work to cover. So we have many examples. I will mention you another example of our colleague, Ismail Al-Ghul. He has been arrested in March 2024, and he has been investigated and he has been released. 4 or 5 months later, they killed him and they fabricated documents against him to justify the killing. So we are witnessing a stages of crimes against journalists by killing and justify the killing. And I want to ask you and ask the audience, why the Israeli occupation forces doesn't allow to any international journalist to get inside to Gaza to cover freely and to give another perspective to what is happening there? Because they don't want the reality, these genocide and these crimes to be covered. They want the truth to be killed and hidden from Gaza.
Tamer, you say it's a death sentence for those who dare take up the challenge of telling what is happening, and particularly what we're seeing is the targeting of health professionals who we've seen being killed in hospitals, and also some of them being personally targeted. So I'm going to talk about the blanket protection of emergency and health and aid workers and journalists, but I want to focus on journalists. What can be done to protect these journalists if they are telling the world what is contrary to what is being said, as in something that is different to the propaganda that is being put out there? How can you be protected? How can you be protected, realistically speaking?
Yes, realistically speaking, we should launch, even if it's late, an international campaign to let the international journalists to get inside to Gaza, to enter Gaza, to have envoys of journalists and representatives of all syndicates and all organizations who are seeking for the protection for journalists in all over the world, to go to Gaza, to support and back their colleagues in the ground. It's the time to have the legal path, and a serious legal path, to put these criminals and killers of journalists and to achieve the justice for journalists. It's the time to stop this genocide and support their colleagues on the ground. It's shame on these organizations, on these institutions who are calling for freedom and for protection of journalists to keep and maintain their silence. The Palestinian journalists don't need words, don't need condemnations and statements. They need a great and real interventions and work.
What
and
does that
serious
intervention
work.
look like, Tamer? That's what I'm trying to understand. Because on the one hand, the Israeli government and military is saying that it's part of casualties of war and they're in the wrong place, wrong time. How can the international community protect journalists in a war zone that doesn't differentiate between friend and foe, or even, as I say in this case, somebody trying to do humanitarian work? Because bringing to attention the world what is happening in Gaza is a service. How can you be better protected in an environment where, as I mentioned, infants are being killed?
To stop this tough siege of Gaza, to send journalists there to support the Palestinian journalists and to put the pressure on Israel to allow for international journalists to get into Gaza. We have now a few journalists are working bravely from Gaza. Do you know that we cannot able even logistics to support them? They are suffering from starving. They are suffering.
Yes.
You know, in the case you mentioned about yesterday when they shelled and killed the 5 journalists in Nasser Hospital. You know, we have around 3 or 4 Palestinian journalists have been injured. 2 of them in a very serious conditions, and there is no any way to treat them in Gaza in such circumstances. It's the time to support and to send the convoys and send the international journalists to support the Palestinian journalists on the ground. The other thing which is very important is to boycott the Israeli narrative in justifying killing journalists. It's the time to stand clearly in the right side of the victims, not trying to find why the killer of journalists, why he killed this journalist. To boycott such narrative of justifying killing journalists, it's very important. And third, legal path. We are in a world calling for justice and for laws and for protection, the right of journalism and the right of speech. It's the time for international criminal court to do its real job, to protect the Palestinian journalists and to hold accountability to those killers who are responsible for the killing of the journalists.
Tamer,
So
finally,
what we are witnessing, what we are calling, it's basic, but we didn't witness any such. We left these journalists without any support, no real intervention, and just we hear statements and words. And this is, of course, not enough.
Tamer, as a final question, do you think anybody listening to you, watching you, and just relaying the horrors of what your colleagues have been through will ever want to be a journalist brave enough to even cover not even conflict situations, but situations that could put them in conflict with those in power? What do you think is the impact on this on future journalists?
Of course, I want to say yes, they are impact of their great work. We understand they killed Anas al-Sharif and Muhammad Qreqa 2 weeks ago because of their unique work of the coverage of the starvation crisis and the starvation disaster which is ongoing in Gaza. And their work and contribution has left a huge impact in the international world. We understand there are huge solidarity with the Palestinian civilians and with the Palestinian journalists. We appreciate all these emotional support comes from everywhere in the world. But we are saying it clearly to the organizations and to the international institutions who are calling for protection of journalists, for freedom of speech, for human rights, for respect the laws, international laws. It's late, and it's shame that you are maintaining and remaining this silence in front of such crimes. We believe that what we hear from our colleagues on the ground, they are determined to continue their work. They are determined to keep on their brave work, and they will not surrender. And they believe, I was telling you honestly, the voices of our colleagues in the ground, they believe they will be, the victory will be in the end for justice, for freedom, and for their great work. Any occupation force will not win on such battle which we have. The people, they have their right of freedom, the right of working as a journalist and the professional work, and they believe in the end they will win.
Tamer, thank you so much for speaking to us and sharing with us your experiences and those of your colleagues and your impassioned plea for protection by the international community of journalists. Tamer Al-Nishal is a senior reporter at Al Jazeera Arabic channel in Gaza. He speaks to us about the 2 strikes on Nasser Hospital in southern Gaza in which 20 people were killed. That's the figures we have so far, leading to several journalists. Figure was put at about 5. But it's been said that since the war began, 247 journalists have been killed. And as he echoed the sentiments of some, that being a journalist reporting on what is happening in Gaza, reporting the truth, has turned out into a death sentence, that they are not only harassed, threatened with death, but if they continue against those who are against the work that they're doing, that their families have been targeted and killed as well. Speaking about a journalist who's lost 22 family members because of the work that he was doing. What a difficult time it must be to be a journalist in that part of the world, and also just reporting the devastation, the tragedy that you are seeing. So just thinking of those journalists who are out there doing that brave work, impossible work. And that's how we come to the end of Africa World Hour, on a very sad note, I must say, but one pledging solidarity. And I certainly, if the opportunity would come at the this age, but it's something that I strongly believe in, that we must have more journalists out there showing the world, so that it must be proven that it's not propaganda, the fact that they are being killed, witnessing killings, murders. That's how we come to the end of Africa World Hour. Next, Shayla Ndukumana with African Diaries.